What's up, guys? My name is Zach, and today I am driving a 1968 Pontiac Bonneville sedan. Up front is a 7.0-liter V8, and down below is a 3-speed automatic transmission. Now, I am super excited to be driving this Bonneville because I always love reviewing older cars, especially cars that you don't see on the road anymore. But this is also a runner. As you can tell, it's not a showroom quality car. And as much as I love my showroom quality cars to show you here today, I think this is a really good example of a survivor, of a car that actually withstood the test of time and wasn't painstakingly restored and wiped down with a diaper. And so today, this is a real Bonneville in real condition of how it actually is, and I'm excited to share that with you. But if you would like to submit your own vehicle, you can head on over to my website, zackpradel.com/submit. It's a quick and easy submission form. It takes under a minute to fill out, and I travel all across the country. Today, I'm in Denver. But let's get back to that V8 under the hood. It's lopey and lazy, but in a very awesome 1960s way. And actually, by the end of the 60s, when they started the next generation of Bonneville for the 70s, they had gotten all the way up to 7.5 liters. These were very unrestricted motors because it was pre-oil crisis and pre-emissions crackdown. So they could kind of make them as big as they want, and Pontiac said, yeah, 7 liters good, but what about 7.5? And then they made it so. Like I said, paired to a 3-speed automatic, it's shifting, it's doing the job. It's also a little bit lazy. I wouldn't call it the most tire-squealing, gripping transmission I've ever driven, but that's okay. The Bonneville isn't anything too crazy either. Last but not least, as almost all cars were back in the 60s, the Bonneville is rear-wheel drive. So how does it feel to drive the 1968 Pontiac Bonneville? Well, it's a really relaxed driving experience. The Bonneville, like I mentioned, wasn't anything too sporty or special. They had the GTO at the time. If you wanted that blood-pumping muscle car, you could go and get one of those. This was a full-size family sedan. You drove this across the country. You took this to the corner store. You took this to baseball practice. And so sporty isn't a word that I would use with this vehicle. But that's not always a bad thing. It's really relaxed, steering is super light, visibility is wonderful, and I'm having a good time here today. With that stuff out of the way, let's talk about the interior. Well, in front of me I have a completely horizontal speedometer with the battery off to the left and the fuel off to the right. On the steering wheel, I don't have anything except for the Pontiac logo that also says energy absorbing. So this does have a collapsible steering column. The only safety feature found on this Bonneville is the collapsible steering column, which was very new technology at the time. Off to the left, we do have our light switch, washer, and climate vent. And on the door, we have our crank for the venting window and power full windows. Moving into the center, we do get an analog clock, a climate vent, the AM-only radio, our key to turn the vehicle on, but then the climate controls. Something very interesting about the climate controls is that as you scroll up or turn up the heat, these little bars of red actually come down and fill where the blue was for the climate. Very, very cool to see that. That's awesome to me. I don't know. I think that was a really cool and innovative way of almost having a digital style gauge, but 25 years before digital gauges started to become popular in the 80s. Down below, we have an aftermarket radio because that radio up top doesn't keep up with modern tech, and that means we don't have any cup holders. So unfortunately, yet incredibly predictably, the 68 Bonneville fails the big friggin' bottle test. I do get a bench seat up front, which is really, really comfortable. However, as you're seeing now, there are some springs showing through the seat, and so it has unfortunately turned me into a ventriloquist dummy here today, but bench seat is fine. However, speaking of seats, we have a second row of seats, and this is the sedan, so let's go do a back seat review. All right, so I'm in the back of the 1968 Pontiac Bonneville, overheating because the windows don't work, and it's very warm here today in Denver. However, I am loving it. Power windows back here. We also have ashtrays in the doors, and it is a giant bench seat with no rear seat belts, so you could fit as many people back here. I'm sure many of you watching have stories of growing up in the back of your parents' Bonneville and all 4, 5, 6, maybe even 7 of your siblings back here and the family dog. That was just what they did safety wasn't the biggest concern at the time. In the 60s, you know, with Ralph Nader's Unsafe at Any Speed had started to come out, and it started to spread that maybe cars aren't as safe as the industry might be leading on. So that started to die off towards the end of the 60s, like here in 68. But still, it was very normal to pack as many people as you physically could in the back of your Bonneville, and to be fair, in the front of your Bonneville, and hit the road. So very cool to be partaking in that. The windows are nice and wide. You could really see the world through that, and that's very awesome. However, speaking of large spaces, let's hop into the very back and talk about the trunk. All right, around the back of the 68 Bonneville, and square key for the ignition, but circle key for the trunk. And I have 4 circle keys, so you might have to bear with me here for a second as I try to figure out which one works. Not that one. Not that one. There we go. 3rd time's a charm. So once we are back here, it is so large. One of the largest trunks I've ever seen. Now, what's something interesting about 60s car design that we started to see in like the 70s and 80s was a cutout down here, so you didn't have to lift your objects up and over. That doesn't have that cutout, and so you do have to lift stuff up and over, but you could fit as much stuff back here as you physically wanted. I mean, good Lord, this is quite the look back here, if I do say so myself. Now we gotta talk about the looks, and I love this red color. I love the vinyl roof, and for 1968, it got a new front fascia that had horizontal headlights as opposed to vertical headlights. So it wasn't new styling for 68, but almost every model year of this generation of Bonneville got some type of visual update. That was just what they did in the 60s, was every model year you would go and get something new, whether that be headlights, grill, fins, chrome fittings. It was just kind of the thing to do, is that every model year they changed something, and so the headlights and front fascia were for 1968. However, with all of this being said, let's get on to my final thoughts. What do I think driving this 1968 Pontiac Bonneville? Well, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, this isn't a showroom quality vehicle. This has seen a thing or two. And while that might steer most reviewers away, it actually attracted me to the car. Because as I looked at every dent, ding, and scratch, I couldn't help but think about how a modern Pontiac, or since Pontiac's out of business, just a modern vehicle would fare. This car had a mechanical issue that shoved it into a guardrail, and it slapped the front and rear end on the passenger side. If that happened in a Camry today, that car would be totaled out. And if it wasn't totaled out, then it would just be very, very expensive to fix, and I would be willing to bet that you wouldn't be able to drive it home. This is quite the opposite. The owner drove it home and has since left it. There is no mechanical damage done to the vehicle. It didn't even need an alignment. That's the glory of these old big cars. Now, of course, there's downsides. Without the emissions test, this is a very dirty vehicle that, sure, puts pollutants in our air. I'm not gonna deny that. They're slower than modern cars. They're less efficient. They don't have as much tech as modern cars. But to focus on that would be missing the point of driving a classic. This car was built to last, and built to a quality that we don't see anymore. And so when it comes to these older Survivor cars, I always bring up the Survivor bias, which in this case means don't judge this Pontiac Bonneville because it's banged up. Judge it because it's still running at all. Judge it by the fact that it has survived and endured almost 60 years here on this cruel, cruel earth. Because so many of its competitors and so many of its siblings are sitting rotting in a junkyard or recycled into soda cans. So here is a 1968 Pontiac Bonneville, running, driving, and operating just as it did so many decades ago. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Huge thank you to Jacob for letting me take out his 68 Bonneville. I was so excited to drive this vehicle. Jacob has been absolutely awesome. He's wonderful to work with, and I look forward to coming back out here to the Mile High City and reviewing more of his cars in the future. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.